Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Tunde. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Um, sir, it's a week of so many things that have happened all around the world, and I'm just going to dive right into it. But this week, I'm going to start from Africa. There has been that very fantastic news about the malaria vaccine and the World Health Organization recommending that for children in Africa. How do you respond to that news, sir?
Um, I am very happy for us Africans and for this program that at least we have one good news affecting Africa. Uh, More than anything else, the malaria parasite, well, in a way, it's been good news and bad news affecting the malaria parasite. First of all, uh, even though the malaria parasite is identified with Africa, actually it is a tropical parasite that you will find in South America, you will find in Southeast Asia, but primarily you will find in Africa. And it kills more of our children than any other disease. And they've been working on a vaccine for it for who knows, 100 years, 60 years. And finally, some good news came out that they've been able to develop a vaccine applicable to children, but not to be used in isolation. When used in isolation, I think it's about 36% effective. But when used uh, in collaboration with other uh, 70 something percent. So this is good news for Africa. And I say congratulations to Africa. Of course, of course, the malaria, the mosquito, the malaria prevented Africa from being Australia or being North America in the sense that it prevented Africa from becoming an excellent continent to be occupied by Europeans because they just couldn't survive the malaria parasite. So, I remember one of the one of the political parties fighting for independence in Africa using the mosquito as one of its symbols to signify freedom because of the role the mosquito played, in. But there is a second good news on Africa, and that is the Nobel Prize in Literature to an African literary scholar from Tanzania, or if you want to be specific, from Zanzibar, but who then went to live in Great Britain and has written profusely. I think he will be the second African scholar in 40 something years who will be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. So that's the second good news coming out of Africa. And let me surprise you. There is a third good news on Africa. And I will tease you by simply giving a slight indication. Where did several African presidents and leaders congregate last week? It was in Ethiopia for the
Ah,
swearing in of the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the first elected Prime Minister, the first free elections to be held in Ethiopia. Their presence, the presence of African leaders, African heads of states, symbolized their identifying with the prime minister and identifying with the significance of a free elections in Ethiopia. Because, you know, by the time the independence of Africa was rolling in, it was an emperor they had, Emperor Haile Selassie. After he was overthrown, it was a military regime. When that military regime was then overthrown, well, it was representatives of the movement that overthrew him. And this will be the first free and fair elections. So those are the
sir,
three good news out of Africa.
sir, I don't want to dampen your third point there, but we're seeing in the news that the US is talking about possibly sanctioning them based on some report from a media outlet that they may have used their national carrier to transfer weapons to Eritrea. What do you have to say to that, sir?
I know the media that you are talking about. What do the Americans know? And what does the CNN know about Ethiopia? I've been following the CNN since the civil war started in Ethiopia. Have they mentioned the fact that the Tigray people, the Tigray leaders, were actually in power after the military was overthrown without any election being held? But they didn't like the fact that they then lost out when this present prime minister was put in power. They didn't like it. And that's when they then started this liberation movement and started the war in by attacking the barracks of the central government. The central government then sent in troops there, and they defeated the Tigray movement. And all of a sudden, the Tigray movement got hold of weapons. Where did those weapons come from? CNN will not tell you that. And there is a particular correspondent, an African lady, who, the moment I see her on CNN, I say, what bad news for Africa now? They always produce her to go and produce bad news, jaundiced news about Africa. So I am not surprised that the United States will now be, who has ever asked the United States how they flew weapons to their soldiers wherever their soldiers are fighting. Whoever asked them? And if you get a pressman who wants to do that, you will get one general who will say, we will blow you off the surface of the earth. Nobody ever asks, how did you get your weapons into Afghanistan? How did you get your weapons into Iraq? How did you get your weapons into Syria? But now somebody has to sniff around as how Ethiopia got weapons to Eritrea, which was helping to fight on the side of, and all of a sudden, to me, it's like CNN wants to get America into another war. They are not happy that their war correspondents don't have things to report upon. And they've now decided that Africa should be the next port of call for American military might and for the military industrial complex in the United States. So I'm not surprised, but it doesn't. In fact, don't you regard what America is saying as a slap in the face of African leaders? African leaders went to Ethiopia for a celebratory visit for the swearing in. And all of a sudden, America is talking about uh, 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 sanctions against Ethiopia. To me, that's a slap in the face of African leaders.
Prof, while we're on Africa, we spoke extensively about France in the last 2 weeks, and I don't want us to dwell too much on that, but there are 2 points I want to raise. One is the US Secretary of State's visit, and the fact that during an interview, he actually spoke in French during that interview. And the interviewer pointed to the fact that, well, you should know better in how to handle this kind of things. And my question to you, sir, to what extent should the fact that the U.S. Secretary of State uh, uh, is able to speak French, to what extent should that drive diplomatic relations between the two countries?
Well, um, the United States is kowtowing to France. Um, so unnecessarily, from my point of view. Trump would never have done this. Even if Trump could speak French, or his Secretary of State, even if he could speak French, they wouldn't do this. This is like licking the boots of France. Is it necessary? Okay, you've admitted you did something wrong. How far are you going to go in licking the boots of France? How far? I mean, you are the you are still the most powerful country in the world. You are. And to me, there is a limit. And this is, you see, this is where Trump started his America first. Because in a way, the way the State Department and the Biden administration is handling its foreign policy is disgusting. So I mean I don't I see the point they are trying to make by getting him to speak French is to appeal to France to forgive them, uh, and hoping to appeal to that soft cultural part of France. And France does like people who speak their language. Macron speaks English fluently. You wouldn't know it unless you catch. I mean, you catch him at uh, you know at a different opportunity. You wouldn't know that he speaks English fluently. So really, it's disgusting what American diplomacy is becoming.
So let me put to you a question here. I'll move away from France because I think that's a more important question here. And this is the case of Abu Zubaydah, the former detainee in Guantanamo Bay, and the first test case that is going to come before the Supreme Court. The United States government is trying to block that on the basis of national security and the fact that it's not something they want to share. And the question, sir, is to what extent should the Supreme Court hear this case regardless of the position of the United States government? Because we're talking about potential atrocities that has been committed by the United States personnel in this case.
Wherever issues of national security concerns are flagged by a government, my own predisposition is that really the judiciary should give the government a very broad room to maneuver, because the government has access to intelligence which it cannot share with the court, even the Supreme Court. For example, the intelligence may be coming from maybe a minister of a different country or a government official of a different country. And if that intelligence is known, that country could probably trace the intelligence to the minister or the high government official. And of course, that in a lot of countries is treason, for which somebody could be executed. And if people get to know that intelligence which you share with the United States could sometimes leak and put your life in danger, that source of intelligence will dry up and it will compromise the effectiveness of the American government. And then people will turn around and say, how come you didn't know? How come you couldn't have prevented the 9/11? And the government will not be able to say it's the fault of the Supreme Court. So to that extent, I think that given the conservative disposition of the present Supreme Court, probably they may just uphold the national security concern defense of the government and allow. But if I were the lawyer for the government, this is what I would be arguing. Give us room to protect America. Give us room to protect our sources of intelligence. And how we get this intelligence may involve doing things which will not be sustained under the Constitution, if you know what I mean. Um, you know, the intelligence work is not a clean work. It's not. And processes that are used to extract and get information that you will need to protect your country, your people, may not be what the Boy Scout movement will approve. And in any case, I mean, is this not why every country in the world sets up an intelligence unit, whether it's the CIA, MI6, uh, every country in the world has an intelligence unit, and you don't want to know what they do to protect you. It's better you don't know.
Thank you for that, sir. But while we're talking about the United States, there was an announcement earlier on in the week that the United States had chosen to release information about their nuclear stockpile. And this is something that, and I'll read this to you, sir. The Biden administration is conducting a review of its nuclear weapons policy and capabilities ahead of the 2020 meeting of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Conference. Is this the right thing for the United States to be doing at this time?
Yes, nothing wrong with that, because actually under the Strategic Arms Limitation Agreement, both Russia and the United States agreed on the number of warheads that they will keep. They also agreed on the number of their missiles and their range. Uh, of course, to keep that strategic arms limitations agreement valid, you've got to know that each side is keeping to the terms of the agreement. So what Biden released to that's been widely known in the nuclear circles for quite a while. Even I think the number the Russians have is also known. Maybe not in Jerusalem and Jericho, but within the nuclear circles of experts, they know the figure.
So, this week we saw the largest number of fighter jets from China break through into the Taiwanese defense airspace. And that caused quite a bit of an uproar from Taiwan, but also from the United States. However, President Biden has released a statement where he has said that he and China's Xi Jinping have decided to abide by the Taiwan Agreement. What is the Taiwan Agreement, and should that still be binding in this present time?
To understand the contents of the Taiwan Agreement, you have to step back to how it came about. When the Chinese Communist Party overran China and won the Civil War, the government of Chiang Kai-shek, which was called the Chinese National Government, fled into exile into Taiwan and claimed that they were moving the seat of government to Taiwan, but that Taiwan was part of mainland China. Now, of course, there were what one will call original Taiwanese who had always maintained that they are not Chinese, that they are Taiwanese, and that Taiwan was a separate country. But there's nobody in the world who supported them. And so the Taiwan Agreement was that the United States agreed with China that Taiwan was part of China, but that China will not use force to annex Taiwan, that Taiwan will not be annexed by force. Now, that's the Taiwan Agreement. Of course, at that time, America was more powerful than China. China had nothing. China had not even totally imposed. The Chinese Communist Party had not totally imposed its authority on mainland China. So there was no use, claiming that you are going to go to Taiwan by force. The United States wouldn't permit you, because the nationalist government that fled to Taiwan was an ally of the United States. At that time, the Chinese were satisfied that their claim that Taiwan was part of China had been recognized. Now, this was something that was done after the Second World War. How many years ago? 70, 80 years ago. Now, the mood in Taiwan itself has now changed. That the government of Taiwan is now claiming that Taiwan is an independent country, not an adjunct of mainland China. And China is saying, since when? Since when? After all, until 1960 or nine, I knew until the 1970s, the government of Taiwan occupied the Chinese seat in the United Nations. To let you know how convoluted this whole issue is. They occupied the Chinese seat in the Security Council and in the General Assembly. But, sometimes during the 1970s, an ordinary vote was taken, which was not subject to the veto, saying the seat of China, both in the National Assembly, both in the General Assembly and in the Security Council, belongs to mainland China and not Taiwan. And so Taiwan was kicked out of the UN, and the Chinese mainland China occupied the seat, in the Security Council and in the General Assembly. So the, the issue now is, how do you resolve this conundrum without Taiwan and America losing face? It has become caught up with all this whole Chinese claim of sovereignty over Southeast Asian area. It has become caught up in it that, if you like, an adjunct of that was Hong Kong, because the British tried to work out this kind of agreement of Hong Kong, one nation, two systems, for granting independence to Hong Kong. And we've seen what has happened. Gradually, China has nibbled away at the independence measures of Hong Kong until actually now there's nobody, no scholar, no diplomat that I know who will maintain, who will claim that Hong Kong is still independent of China. So, is that the way Taiwan will go? That one morning we will wake up and it will be, where is America prepared to go to war with China over Taiwan? And then we will all be talking on a program like this as to the consequences. It's a delicate matter, because it's got to be resolved at a time when the United States will not feel that it has lost face. And the, the Taiwanese themselves will feel, well, they have no choice. Yes, they could go into war with mainland China, but what is the disparity in power, not only between Taiwan and mainland China, but between mainland China and the United States, which basically is the protector of Taiwan now?
Sir, there is a question that's coming on YouTube that I want to pass to you, and there's another direct one. But let's deal with the YouTube one first, because that's in line with what you're saying. The other question takes us back to France. Um, this one says the Biden position on the Taiwan agreement with China is a very deft move to checkmate China by the USA, like the AUKUS Treaty. Do you agree with that?
I mean, it's, yes, it's a clever move, because it reminds China that there is a subsisting agreement, um, the Taiwan Agreement. But as I've explained, an agreement signed at the end of the Second World War, is it still subsisting now? And in any case, under that Taiwan Agreement, did the United States not concede that Taiwan belongs to China? It did. So, but you know, it's a clever move by both sides. I would say both sides got what it wanted in the telephone discussion between the president of United States and president of China, which is, we concede, you own Taiwan, you concede you will not take over Taiwan by force. Full stop.
Thank you for that, sir.
I yes, I know the questioner brought up the issue of Australia, again, that submarine, you know,
Yes, sir.
issue of which strengthens right now, is strengthens is going to, let us put it that way, is going to strengthen Australia's military capability. But uh, when I read my reading of that submarine deal is the Chinese are not claiming they will take over Australia now or ever. On the contrary, resources of Australia are now going to be strained by being used on this submarine deal, which at the end of the day is just, we started this program talking about malaria and the mosquito. At the end of the day, the whole package deal with Australia is just going to be a mosquito nuisance to China. And you know what we Africans say about mosquito, you've got to be careful about the way in which you deal. It's a nuisance. No, nevertheless, it's just there, to irritate you, but not going to make a difference to Chinese. I mean, I maintain that if you belong to the Hans Morgenthau school, a prognosis of Chinese uh, military capability in Southeast Asia is going to be the superpower there, just as the United States is the superpower in the Atlantic Ocean. When and we've discussed this, when will China become the number one in the world in terms of military capability? We can argue. I mean, we can discuss this until the cows come home, but it is on its way. It's not there, it is on its way. And if it is smart, it will not challenge the United States until it becomes so evident that China is there. It's not there yet.
Thank you, sir. Sir, someone has pulled up a question about France. I said I didn't want to go to France, but I'm going to pass this one to you, sir. And this is regarding the diplomatic row between France and Algeria. And this is coming from a statement that has been attributed to President Macron. And I will read what the person is saying here. This is, however, they've called it a private conversation, but nevertheless, it's a point that affects the Sahel region as well. So here, this is the comment, sir. The building of Algeria as a nation is a phenomenon worth watching. Was there an Algerian nation before French colonization? That is the question, that the point that's been attributed to President Macron. And for this, Algeria has banned French military aircraft from its space and recalled its ambassador. How do you respond to this message?
Well, I think it was not a wise statement by Macron, if he made it, it wasn't a wise statement. And again, I hope Macron will learn his lesson that apart from his conversation with his wife, there is nothing called private conversation between a president and other people. Now, if you study European history, when did France become France? We can turn this statement around. When did France become France? Why not for, even after it became France, why not for American intervention in the First World War? Would Germany not have, you know, scattered France into whatever it wants to, several colonies of Germany? If America had not come into Europe during the Second World War, would France not have been a colony of Germany? So, if you live in a glass house, don't throw stones. It's quite true that it is the colonization exercise by France in North Africa that, created all those artificial boundaries there. Just as it was during the Berlin Conference, if you recall, in the 1800s, that created all these artificial boundaries in Africa. However, don't throw stones, because you yourself, you are not immune from others making a claim that they are responsible for your boundary the way it is now, and even for your existence the way it is now. Don't. All you need to do to understand what I'm talking about, look at Eastern Europe. Look at Eastern Europe. What happened after the Second World War? The boundary of Poland was not what it was before the Second World War started. Czechoslovakia has now become Czech and Slovakia. Yugoslavia, which was created as a result of those wars, are now different countries. France was lucky. The United States and Great Britain came to rescue her during the First World War and during the Second World War. Maybe we will be talking about 3 separate nations occupying where France is now. But just lucky that those countries came to rescue her. So I think Macron really ought to be, he's a young man, and I suppose from time to time, he says things that he shouldn't say.
So let's go to Iran.
Mhm.
Now, last week we talked about Turkey speaking to Russia and building relations with Russia. Now we have another point emerging regarding Iran and Russia. And Iran says, this is quoting the foreign minister, is saying that they're looking for a big jump in Russia relations. What would a big jump mean in relations between Iran and Russia? That's the first question. And the second question is, Russia seems to be creating this relationship with countries that typically America is going against. And you've talked about the new world order that's emerging. Are we seeing this starting to play out exactly as you had predicted?
Well, it's well, I'll borrow your words. It is predictable that in trying to uh, create a new world order, which is not created yet, but it is in the process of being created. Um, Different major powers are going to be making their moves on the chessboard. Uh, they're going to be looking for allies that uh, when um, I was going to use a phrase, but this is I mean this is a global audience we have. So Nigerians will understand if I've used that phrase. But let me resist the temptation to use that. When things then settle, uh, who do you have on your side? Because that then creates the parameters of a new world order. And I think that um, it's not just Russia that is uh, making the chess move. The United States also is making the chess move. We talked earlier on about about Australia, the submarine deal with Australia. Um, the post Brexit Britain is actually also looking for its own allies. And that phrase of special relationship with the United States uh, is starting to come up. Although I noticed that the new foreign minister of Britain used the term valuable relationship rather than special relationship. As time goes on, we will find out the difference between valuable um, and special. Uh, Maybe there is a good wordsmith in the foreign office who can conjure up words. Um, the Balkan people, the Balkan countries, are also now having fought their war of independence of Yugoslavia, have now decided that they also now need to come together and seek to, create a Balkan alliance. The same thing with Baltic, the Baltic countries, even though they are saying they would like to join NATO and join the EU, and the EU countries are saying, well, let's sort out our matters first before we bring in, new people. Maybe haven't got their fingers burnt on Brexit. They want to make sure, and uh, Angela Merkel is leaving. Let the EU settle before we start looking at the Baltic countries, who would like to join us. So everybody, you know, everybody is making the chess move. That's the best text, the best illustration I could use. They are all playing chess games. And if you play chess, you will know how you don't even know where your opponent is going. you better calculate his steps 6 moves ahead before you even make your own move. And I think this is what we're starting to see in the world.
So there is another question here, um, and this person is saying that since we addressed Macron's comments, or the comments attributed to Macron, how about the ones attributed to Mark Pence while he was having an interview? And it's this, it's regarding the January 6th insurrection. And this is the comment, sir. It says, I know the media wants to distract from the Biden administration's failed agenda by focusing on one day in January. They want to use that one day to try and demean the character and intentions of 74 million Americans who believed they could be strong again and prosperous again and supported our administration in 2016 and 2020. Is he right to be comparing what happened on January 6th and almost trivializing it in comparison to the 74 million people that supported their administration?
Well, I hope this will be a lesson to parents that when they're going to name their sons, they'll keep in mind that there was somebody once called Macbeth, so they can avoid all the Max. Um, there, there's a saying that never call a man great until he's dead and buried. Um, evening of January 6th, Mark Pence was regarded as a great man, an honorable man. He stood up for freedom. He stood up for America. He already the canonization was taking place, and now you have that interview. And I understand there's a book that is that he may be maybe in the offing. Uh, I wish they would stop writing these books, because that's is not only a drain on the pockets of my admirers who buy those books and send them to me, but I keep having to change my glasses to read these books. What he has now said has diminished him. It has diminished him. I don't know why he said it, except that I suppose politicians always want to be, uh, uh, not only in the limelight, but aiming for elections that may put them in positions of public policy, because he's just destroyed himself. Nobody thinks he's great anymore. And each time somebody praises him now for January 6th, they will now say, however, he himself has brought in a however into whatever judgment is made about him. And that's why, and when I read it, and I heard what he said, and I read it, I said, that philosopher who said, never call a man great until he's dead and buried, knew what he was talking about.
Sir, I'm going to throw you another question as we start to round up. A few weeks ago, Britain lost a very major sports title, and that is the boxing heavyweight titles. Now, over the weekend, there is another title held by a British boxer that's going to be up for grabs. Which way do you call it, sir? I don't know if you're a boxing fan, but which way do you call it? Are we going to retain our last belt or not?
It is very interesting that you use the term "we the British." I'm a Nigerian, and and the boxer who lost those titles is a Nigerian, and I won't be surprised before long if the British press starts to say Nigerian ex heavyweight title. It's only when he reclaims those titles that they will then remember that, oh, he's British as well. So, no, the Nigerian fellow is going to retain the title. I can bet my drink on it. He's gonna retain the title. The British man may lose, but the Nigerian man will win.
Thank you, sir. And on that note, we will end the program this evening. Thank you to our viewers for being there. Thank you for the comments on YouTube, and for those that were sent through the other channel. Thank you. Your questions make the program really lively. We really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Prof.
Wakanda.
Thank you, sir. Bye bye, sir.
Bye.